live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening.
Morning.
Good morning, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's about to be about a foot of snow where I'm at, so just trying to stay as warm as possible. Don't think I'm going outside for 2 straight days, but what better way to occupy my time than talking college football with you and then watching the NFL games later?
That is very true. You know, the South isn't really going to do well with ice, and we're just our infrastructure is not built like that where you currently preside. But nevertheless, it is the first year's winter storm here, Joe, and as crazy as the weather is outside, college football is heating up, especially with guys like Dabo going after Pete Golding and Pete Golding really throwing caution to the wind and going after players. And then, Joe, for the first time, and I think God knows how long, I finally feel like we didn't put this down to talk about, but it's really heating up in reference to college football actually getting some wins here early in the offseason. Let me explain. To some degree, contracts being upheld, right? Damon Williams and others being upheld. The restraining order got granted by Duke about Mensa. Then you have a situation where the playoffs, the extension was not met. The playoff is going to stay at 12, which we had talked about. So right here in the early on stages, Joe, of some of these situations, it seems as if early in this offseason, we're winning, right? Like the fan is winning. You didn't get the expanded playoff. Schools are fighting back and winning. Judges have kind of had enough. And so to be a little honest with you, it's a little encouraging about some of the settling down in reference to some of this. Now, do you still need guardrails? Do you still need to get some things in place? Without a doubt, because I do think Mensa is going to ultimately win and play for Miami. And it's actually the reason why I didn't put Miami in my top 5 of way too early 2026, because he's technically not there and Duke wins a restraining order.
Yeah.
So it just gets to a point in time where, Joe, it seems like early in this offseason, none bigger than the expansion not happening in the playoffs, that I think we're starting to get some wins here early in the offseason.
Well, I think that the just very simple way of looking at this is that it does feel like this offseason and probably hopefully next offseason, we're kind of calming down in terms of how things are working. There was a lot of just completely untouched chaos with the playoff, with the transfer portal, with high school, just every single layer of the sport. There were not a lot of guardrails put into place. There was no stopping all the rapid changes. And it does feel like we've entered into a really nice spot where, the player movement is a lot clearer. We do need courts to step in and to be able to handle a lot of these things, to set precedents for what can happen in the future. That is the ultimate, biggest layer for the future of the sport is court involvement. It sucks that that's the world that we live in, but for every professional sport, there had to be legal impact. There had to have been unionization. There had to have been court cases that allowed to shape the way that the sport looks now, where it is an actual settled situation. So I do think we are progressing towards something that is a little bit more calm. I am praying that that's the case and we don't end up getting hit with something even more ridiculous.
You know what I thought about here too? Remember when Tom Brady sued the NFL in reference to his 4-game suspension and lost? You remember how there was a lot of chaos. Remember there was a lot of domestic violence cases, which all of those guys deserve to be penalized. Tom Brady sues and loses. Remember, you're not really having a lot of NFL stuff happen like that over the last 3 years after the courts determined that you're not going to win these.
Yeah.
I mean, and so now you get to a point where in some of these cases, Duke and Mensa go head to head and Mensa loses. Now, I ultimately think he finds a way to win. He can file in the court of Miami or in Florida and probably win this. But it just comes down to a determination, Joe, of how these things are playing out early. It's a big deal. Any thoughts on the college football playoff not expanding? Because I think that's the biggest win in all of this.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I think that we're getting an actual other year of evidence. We're getting the opportunity to see what the 12-team playoff is going to look like instead of just jumping all the way to 16. That was one of the biggest layers to this that I felt was getting under discussed. We can sit here and talk about formats, which is the best. Like, forget that for 2 seconds. We need 5 years of a 12-team playoff to determine if it is the best version. I think that there was this rush to just expand, to get more games, to make more money. And I think that's stupid. You need to have actual performances with this current model to understand what are the best aspects of it, what are the worst aspects of it. Because in 5 years from now, we could come to the conclusion, hey, we're not going to make much more money, so why are we destroying the product? There should be a willingness to be patient with this. And it feels like both sides meaning the Big Ten and the SEC, we're not going to just rush this. And that's where the biggest win comes out of all of it.
Well, especially Sankey, because Sankey declined and he kept declining because he doesn't want to go to 24 teams, nor do I think that he should. Mm-hmm. But let me just throw this in there with you. The problem is not the format of the 12-team playoff. The problem is some of the teams that are getting in and are allowed to get in the 12-team playoff. That's the real problem, right? Like, let's address the elephant in the room. In year one of the 12-team playoff, you had Boise State and Arizona State get buys when they didn't deserve them. Okay? Didn't deserve them, didn't earn them, shouldn't have been there. They got them anyway, and they both lost. This season, you have a situation where not only Tulane gets in, but so does James Madison because of some fluky rule. And the ACC screwing that up. It was a fluky rule, shouldn't have been allowed in. It is what it is. So, do we have a problem with the 12 teams, the 12-team playoff, or do we have a problem with the actual teams that are getting in? Because I think that's more of the issue than anything. More of the issue is that Notre Dame and Texas should have been in this playoffs. And I hope that we're going to get to a place where, all right, listen, hey. The top 4 Power 4 or top 4 champions, automatic bid. And if that's a group of 5 team, because Joe, Tulane would have been in over Duke, right? Tulane would have been in over Duke. So you got an automatic qualifier. Sounds good. Everything else, everybody else, the other 8 is at large. There's none of this other BS that we're going here. You don't need 5 automatic qualifiers.
Well, we're never – the thing is we're never going to get – we're never going to get
No. Sankey stated that the next thing that he thought that we should do would be to get 4 automatic qualifiers for the highest champions and then 8 seeds, the 8 highest seeds, or 8 high at-large teams. If that happens, I do believe that you sit in a very comfortable situation here. If that were to happen, I don't think anybody's going to agree with that to go kind of probably where you're going to go there. But we got to structure this 12. We don't know how the 12-team playoff works because it's not structured right yet because the wrong teams are getting in.
Yeah, that's kind of my whole point is that you can't – it's not enough evidence to see from just 2 years, especially with 2 years where there were issues, where there were problems. There wasn't enough to be able to analyze it. Now, I do think that the one negative from this, because we're sticking at 12 teams, another part that wasn't discussed with this, no changes are happening.
Right.
It's not like last year where they made the adjustment where they changed the system with the buys. No changes are going to occur this time around. Yep. So that's the negative with this, where they didn't make an adjustment for trying to protect against the G5s. But for those who recall, the whole Notre Dame rule that everybody keeps freaking out over and screaming that this is so unfair for Notre Dame, that they don't understand what it really means. It's more so intended to protect. That to me is the biggest protection from preventing the stupid JMU crap from happening a second time around. That ensures it's not going to bump out. There is such a little chance that Notre Dame being at 12 and getting in is going to bump somebody out. What it would have instead done with the changes to the ACC tiebreakers is Miami would have gone to the ACC championship game. They would have ended up getting in, and Notre Dame would have gotten in over JMU. This is the one thing that pisses me off the most, that everybody goes, oh my God, Notre Dame is a bunch of crybabies and they try to get what they want. Listen for 2 seconds and pay attention for 2 seconds to realize that this adjustment helps with the playoff field and is not going to take out any qualified teams. More often than not, if there is a team that's hovering around where Notre Dame is, they'll probably be ranked behind them, and there'll probably be somewhat justification for that occurring. I would like to have some sort of a rule set in place that keeps a damn second G5 team out of the way. I don't care if anybody gets upset over that. We've said it over and over again, and I'm not going to continue to re-explain it. I don't need to watch JMU get boat raced and then climb back into the game because Oregon stopped trying in the fourth quarter.
Well, and I don't disagree with that to this extent. If it's for a G5 situation or G6 situation, yes. If ultimately it keeps a team out that potentially has the same record and had a tougher strength of schedule, that's what I think people worry about. That's the real, and that is a plausibility. Mm-hmm. That is a like, for example, if Texas is 10-2 and Notre Dame's 10-2, hypothetically speaking, if they're given that, like, hey, if you're in the top 12, you get in, and you're arguing about Texas and Notre Dame, and I'm just throwing out a random team, it doesn't, who cares who the other team is, but they have a tougher strength of schedule, then it starts becoming a problem. Because if you're in a situation where Notre Dame's mid-40s, high 40s in strength of schedule, and Texas in this scenario is top 25, top 10, then I start having a problem.
Well, for the vast majority of instances that have happened like that, a team like Texas would either – a lot of times the teams that have been there or past that 12 spot have had 3 losses, or they've had a really bad loss on their resume. So that's kind of why I just don't – I think that for the last 2 years, we've had a picture for what those teams look like in those different pockets. But I don't think – I think it'll be easier to justify Notre Dame being in.
Again, one loss versus a tougher schedule versus one non-loss.
Okay, but if Texas's loss, if Texas was 10-2 in the SEC, that means that they would have lost an inexplicable game. That's what I just find it. Wait, I find it. Yes, I would find it extremely hard to believe that, knowing how voting works and how the committee goes with ranking teams, that they would put Texas with the same record as Notre Dame behind Notre Dame. I don't think that would come to fruition.
I think they somewhat did that this year, to be blunt.
They were 9-3 this year.
Okay. Yeah. They also played Ohio State and lost, but they also beat a team that Notre Dame couldn't.
They were 9-3, but you're creating a scenario out of a scenario that didn't happen.
No, it literally happened. You faced 9-3 this year. You faced off against a common opponent, and they beat them, and you did not.
They lost to Florida. I'm not doing this again. The season's over. They lost to Florida.
And you're not in a conference.
That doesn't have anything to do with it. They lost to Florida.
Going to Florida and losing versus going to Boston College and getting in a dogfight is two completely different things, and you know
you can't lose. I stand by this. The SEC schedule is not as hard as everybody thinks that it is. It's not as hard as it once was. It is not as hard. Losing to Florida is a bet. It's not bullshit.
13 of the 16 teams being top 15 in strength of schedule.
Bias.
It's a formula. It's a formula. How is a mathematical equation biased?
Strength of schedule is impacted by ranking, is it not? It's impacted by where teams are ranked.
And you're saying Notre Dame's was not biased? You thought that their schedule was tougher than what Texas went through?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But you're 9-3. You lost to a team with a bad record, a 9-3 Florida team. That has to. I'm not doing this. We need to talk about other stuff because we've yelled about this 100 times.
I think there comes precedent where everybody's like, "Oh, well, they got 3 losses." It's not created equally.
It's
not created equally.
You can't. You're acting like they played a gauntlet of ranked teams every single week, and Notre Dame played FCS opponents. It's not created equally is one of the most flawed arguments for comparing resumes.
Stretch, They played teams like A&M. They played ranked opponents. They played Oklahoma. They played A&M. They played Ohio State. And you're saying
they lost to Florida.
No. Okay,
you don't just get in for playing a hard schedule. That's not how this works.
The playoff teams when they went 2-1.
Okay, Blake, we have other things to talk about. I'm not going down this rabbit hole with you.
It's not just the SEC that's looking at that. Throw a Big Ten team in there.
But I'm thinking
it doesn't matter.
But
throw
Blake,
Oregon in there.
You're Blake, you're missing what I said earlier. If we entered into the situation where you presented the argument where if there were 10-2 teams alongside Notre Dame, I would find it incredibly hard to believe that they would have a sound argument to put Notre Dame ahead of those teams in the rankings. It's not going to happen. If you have a 9-3 circumstance with a team that's 9-3 with a bad loss on their resume, the discussion's thrown out the window.
It's not thrown out the window. Teams don't go through the same things. I'm just never going to agree with that. If you're 2-1 versus playoff teams versus a team that's 0-2, it is going to be created differently. Excuse me. It should be.
I'm not. We have a lot of stuff we have to talk about, so I'm not jumping down this.
Every Ruffino and Joe show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Download the FD Sportsbook app today. Joe and I will be represented and partner with the good friends at FanDuel in the 2026 calendar year. So we're greatly humbled and honored to be partnered with our good friends over at FanDuel. Download the FD Sportsbook app today. Use your mobile device when you do so. Thoughts, questions, concerns, go to FanDuel.com/RG for more details. Well, Joe, we just got a little heated here, but you know who was really heated and really mad and deserves to be really heated and really mad? Well, that's Dabo Swinney. So as everybody is hitting the like button, hitting the share, you're subscribing down below on YouTube. Joe, Friday, Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney came out in a press conference, and I'm not going to say the word I would normally say, but dropped a massive bomb on the college football sports world, regardless of what anybody wants to think about Dabo, regardless of anything that's going on in college athletics right now, but went to a press conference and gave a timeline of Tom Ferrelli leaving Clemson, going to Ole Miss, and becoming their new linebacker. Joe, this is outright.
Luke Ferrelli.
Tom
Ferrelli works at CBS Sports.
I do that every time. I did that with Morton of Texas Tech. If your name's close, I'm going to mix it up. But Luke Ferrelli goes now to Ole Miss after being enrolled at Clemson. Dabo gives the timeline. Joe, I don't think we have to roll through every single little thing that Dabo stated here, but my goodness, your thoughts on this whole thing with Dabo, Clemson, and Ole Miss?
I say a lot of times on this show that I don't like discussing tampering because it's rampant across the sport, but more importantly, it's a lot of hearsay. A lot of times it is rumors, it's fan speculation. This is a completely different situation that we have to talk about. There's an angle that I know that you're going to want to address, and I will allow you to address it because you're much closer to the situation with LSU and Ole Miss being tied, with Lane Kiffin leaving, taking players with them. I will allow you to handle that. Like, this situation is not like the ones that I've tried to not avoid, but have dampened, because we have direct accusations from Dabo with detailed timestamps that he completely laid out. He completely put out a picture for what went down with this whole situation. And it was aggressive. And quite frankly, the handling of it by Pete Golding and Austin Thomas, it was inappropriate as well. You're sending pictures of contracts to a kid. That is such messy negotiating.
Instead of his agent, right, by the way, which in the NFL, right, you get fined for that.
Right. This is to the most messy degree that it's not like the typical rumors that you hear where a school will reach out to an agent, they'll talk to the agent, and then that will lead to whatever happens here. Like, I find it really, really hard to believe that the NCAA will not do something about this. This is not like the Xavier Lucas situation. This is not like the Damon Williams situation. This is not like the Darian Mensah situation. You had a head coach who had a press conference that was supposed to be for introducing his new offensive coordinator that spent a long period of time detailing, again, inappropriate actions with tampering with a player who was enrolled on campus in classes that you pulled out of those classes to then enroll at your school. This has to be the ultimate moment where things shift, where things change. I know people might want to pull from my past talking points where I have said these types of buyout situations and renegotiations with kids that are under contract, I don't think that it is as bad. But look at the timeline of when those things happened. Those things happened weeks ago. They are happening at the end of the portal period closing and before the winter semester or spring semester starts. I think buyouts are good for the sport, but the actions in the timeline of the way that this happened, I think that it is much, much messier.
Well, two things. I pointed this out on Twitter. The funniest thing in all this was Dabo asked the kid for the text messages between him and Pete Golding. And he said, well, if you match the 2-year, $2 million, I'll give them to you. Which I got to be a little honest with you. What a shrewd business decision. What a hell of a business decision. You had all of the leverage and he utilized it. That's number one. But number two, Joe, here's my thing. And this is not me trying to quote unquote defend Ole Miss. How are you going to hit Ole Miss? I know this is blatant and I know it's in the public. How in the world are you going to hit Ole Miss when Auburn and Penn State did exactly the same thing? Mm-hmm. They literally brought teams. They didn't bring players. This isn't like Kiffin. This isn't like some other situations. Joe, they brought an entire team damn near. They brought starters from South Florida and from Iowa State. And nobody, again, wants to bat an eye on that. Why? Why is no one talking? And all of this tampering stuff, why is no one having a big deal with Auburn and Iowa State? Or Auburn and Penn State, excuse me. Why doesn't anybody want to talk about that? But here's the truth. Why in the world did Pete Golding, why was he the one texting him? I don't mean this in a wrong way. It's what you have a GM for. It's what you have director of player personnel for. Why are you the one texting him? Why are you the one doing it? And it's so blatant. And here's another thing. Clemson told them that if you don't stop, we're reporting you to the NCAA. And they did it anyway. You know why? Because are we going to be the first school that you hit for tampering when everybody's doing it? Now, Ole Miss is coming out and saying, well, the only reason we had to do this is because Lane took TJ Daugherty. Well, I grew up in a world where two wrongs don't make a right. So you can't bitch about Lane Kiffin and then do exactly what he just did too. That is hypocritical at its finest. Hypocritical at its finest. So you're mad at Kiffin for taking Prince William and Yellen. You're mad at him for taking TJ Daugherty. And now they're pointing the finger at, well, LSU did this, so we had to respond. Well, hold on now. Joe, they screwed up their contracts with both of those players. They brought in players and paid more money. This is Ole Miss's reporting now, not Blake Ruffino or LSU's side of things. Players found out by agents, this is the report, that they were being lowballed and that they weren't meeting the stated contracts that they were given during the playoff run. So they left you. They left you. You mean to tell me that Prince Will Omam Yellen, that you're going to give $500,000 for, and you're bringing in other players for well more money, that he's not going to want to renegotiate with you after you screwed him over? Austin Thomas, who was at LSU, screwed this up. And then he threw Pete Golding under the bus in giving Clemson ammunition. Here's what I know. At no point did Austin Thomas and Pete Golding not have a conversation about this, and not willingly did Austin Thomas throw him under the bus if that's not what Ole Miss wanted Clemson to know. Didn't happen. So how is this all going to play out? I think Clemson is in the right here. I think, and I have been pretty hard on tampering just in general, but the NCAA's been doing nothing about it. What I think should happen, hey, all right, it's happening, but we're going to start investigating this now, because you can't come back if you're the NCAA in this instance and say to them, all right, well, now we're going to investigate Ole Miss. How do you do that? When everybody in the sport, like to your point, has been saying, we're going to hit you now. How? Entire teams damn near got uprooted and went elsewhere. So are you going to hit everybody? You can't point out one specific person. Now you can, but Joe, if Ole Miss gets taken to court for this or is investigated for this, they're going to sue. They're going to go back to a Mississippi court and say, guys, here's our evidence for our players being tampered with. Texas was willing to give Kawan Lacey $2.5 million. And for a fact, Jabbar Jalouk at Texas, let me say allegedly so I don't get myself in trouble, allegedly was tampering with Kawan Lacey. Now, I know one thing, screenshots never die. They never die. So in case anybody wants to make some claim that that didn't happen, look what Texas did with Isaac Brown. Look what they did with Cam Coleman. So, Joe, my question is not really is Ole Miss in the wrong here, because they're blatantly in the wrong. And for the first time Dabo actually goes in the portal, he learns what the real portal is about. He learns how even when this deal's done, it's not really done. And how much did you like the kid? How much were you paying him? Pete Golding had no care in the world. Oh, you know what? We're going to give you 2 years, $2 million. Oh, yeah? You want to stay there? 2 years, $2 million. Now what you going to say? And he left. And it was the right thing. Here's the thing. Luke Ferrelli did the right thing for him. He did the right thing for him. But you pointed out LSU as the problem here when you screwed up contracts. See, the problem with Ole Miss is they keep saying, oh, it's everybody else's fault, and they keep playing the victim. Since Kiffin's left them, they've played the victim this entire time. You screwed up contracts. No one screwed contracts up for you. You want to know why your two best defenders left? Was because you lowballed them. I thought those were Pete guys. I thought those guys came for Pete Golding. Well, who has the number one class right now? So that is what it is. Joe, do I think that Ole Miss should be hit? Yes. Do I think it's also unfair that you have this entire situation going on? How do you hit them? Because if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I come out and say, wait a goddamn second. Everybody's doing it, and now because Dabo went to a podium and started yelling from the rafters, teams being uplifted and going somewhere else, now how do you hit me? And I know
he also turned over evidence. So we got to that's the thing. The
Joe, is this the first time someone's turned over evidence?
It's the first time that we've publicly known that they've turned over evidence.
Well, true, but I don't think that this is the first time that someone has given over evidence in reference to tampering.
I feel like it would have been reported on, though. These things come out. I think that it would have been reported on if somebody else had.
Well, Xavier Lucas and Darian Mensah, you got to throw them in there too, because they also signed contracts.
But we don't know if any. I'm just trying to point out here, I don't know for certain if any evidence was turned over to the NCAA in those situations. Dabo publicly stated in this whole diatribe that I'm turning this information over to the NCAA.
No, Duke did give the NCAA evidence in reference to tampering.
Okay.
I mean, they literally went into court and got a temporary restraining order and won based off of that evidence. So all that the NCAA has to do at the current moment is go and get a public records request of the case of why they got the restraining order. By the way, the restraining order has been public by Pete Thamel. You can look at it online, of Miami constantly contacting him, which is literally tampering. So if you're Ole Miss and you see Miami, you say, well, how does that get to happen, but you're coming after us?
Well, so this is my point with this, and there's 2 points that I have off of what you just talked about here. I don't think that if you're going to hold Ole Miss accountable, you cannot just sit idly and not hold anyone else accountable. I think that this is something that needs to happen. I think that it needs to be the initiation for investigating Ole Miss, delivering a punishment to Ole Miss. I don't know to what degree. I don't think it needs to be a significant. I think it probably, like we've seen with other penalties, that haven't be a monetary one. I don't think it should be a restriction of scholarships. I don't think it should be anything that is going to like really hurt the future of the program. It should be a financial penalty. And quite frankly, to the same degree of the whole buyout conversation, that financial penalty should go to Clemson. That is how this needs to be handled. There should be a repercussion for your actions, and it should go to the team that you wronged in the circumstance. But I think that then sets up, if you're going to investigate and you're going to dig into this on Ole Miss, if there has been other evidence turned over, you need to have the same level of aggressiveness that you are handling these other situations. Now, I think that just based on everything that Dabo talked about, it has been a lot more inappropriate the way that Golding handled it. It was not communication to representation of offering deals and trying to see what it would take. It was, I'm just going to, like, it's just crazy. That's not how negotiations work in the NFL or in professional sports. You're not just going around sending contracts to kids saying, here's the contract. What do you want to do? That it's manipulative. It's quite manipulative to that. What?
Unless you're Jerry Jones to Micah Parsons.
Sure. Well, in that circumstance, yeah, he's going straight to he's well known for going straight to players and avoiding agents. But the point is it's manipulative to try and operate that way and to try and convince a kid. I think at the same time, though, outside of all this, where I have problem with Ole Miss is what you alluded to here. You can't be Ole Miss and this whole entire time act like you're a victim for Kiffin leaving and taking guys with him, but you're over here doing the same exact shit. You just, it's the biggest thing that pisses me off with all of this with any school, and why I hate tampering and people crying tampering, because I think that everybody freaking does it to a degree. I think people should be held accountable for it, but you can't be a fan base calling tampering and then you get caught red-handed doing it yourself. I don't think Clemson tampers. I think that Dabo wouldn't be stupid enough to go out and be this public. They are in the right for handling it this way if they're the ones who are approaching recruiting players in the portal the appropriate way. Meanwhile, somebody else is doing it with a much messier intention.
Clemson's downfall is because they are doing everything right.
Yes. Yeah.
That is literally Dabo has made a stand in reference to, we're not going to cheat this way. Now, Brent Venables stealing signs, and that you could say, well, Blake, he stole signs. Okay, fair. But at the same time, Joe, they had to go in the portal. They did go in the portal for the first time, and we're just learning that, and I agree with you. You brought up the buyout. Look at Pete Golding's comment. He literally texted a kid and said, what's your buyout? Oh, $500,000? Yeah, that's chump change. That's chump change. But it also directs something that I want to bring out earlier. How did you report that you only gave Prince William and Mom Yellen? Excuse me. I've gotten people got mad. The people got mad because I call him human Yellen. Mom Yellen. How are you mad that he wanted to leave when you gave a linebacker who you don't know $2 million guaranteed, but this guy was a massive factor of why you just made a playoff run? So now you've really put yourself into a box. Y'all reported that these contracts got leaked and you blamed Kiffin for it. Well, what about it now? Because LSU just paid a $500,000 buyout, and you just gave a linebacker that you don't know who wasn't there with you during a playoff run $2 million guaranteed. Now what? So was TJ Daugherty right? Was Prince Will right in his own regard of leaving? It's the most hypocritical thing of all time. But Joe, if you're gonna, in my opinion, if you're gonna go after Ole Miss, you better go after Miami. Because more than anything, Miami did it in a more blatant way. They did it in a more aggressive way. It just wasn't public. Joe, they literally missed out on every quarterback and went and gave $4 million, allegedly, to get Darian Mensah out to bring him to Miami. A $2 million contract is a $2 million contract that you're offering. They gave this kid $500,000, while Miami's over here probably going to spend closer to $5, $6, $7, $8 million in all this with legal battles and all this stuff. And no one, it's not front page news because Dabo isn't out there doing what he's doing. Duke is not out there doing what he's doing. By the way, that was inside the conference. Jim Phillips has yet to say a word. And then Dabo in the press conference came out and said, where's Jim Phillips? You know what, Dabo? Ding, 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 ding. Where is Jim Phillips? Where is he? Because he hasn't stated a word. So if you're, again, as much as people say I hate on Ole Miss, how in the world are you going to hit them when Miami just did something, in my opinion, Far worse. Let's just be honest. You can't say there's no evidence with Miami doing it when there's blatant evidence. They got sued.
But I wouldn't say that. I don't think what Miami did was far worse. I mean, I think
it is by far worse.
How is it far worse?
Because number one, the kid is a quarterback and it's a bigger position. It's inside the conference. And not only have you done this once, you've done this twice.
I don't think that the position affects the gravity.
Miami's the reason that all this started, Joe. The Xavier Lucas case is the reason that people know that they could just buy out contracts and go and do this. They're the reason. They are the.
But I don't think that makes it worse. I just think that it's just a layer to it. I think it's all the same.
Joe, if I punch you in the face right now and it's public, doesn't make it worse that if we're behind closed doors and I beat the shit out of you worse than what it is. It doesn't make it any different.
But I don't think that's related to what we're talking about.
First off, all the lawyers, I would never punch Joe in the face. That's allegedly. Okay? You get what I'm saying. Just because Dabo, I see people, by the way, saying he's dry snitching, or just out there snitching. How is it? I mean, everybody knows what's going on.
But this is why I think that the Ole Miss situation is worse because, well, one, you've generally been crying about your roster getting picked apart, and then you're turning around and doing it. But you have, I don't know for certain what Miami did. I don't. I am able to infer based on implications, but we don't know. I know exactly what Pete Golding did. There's no hearsay about this. I know exactly step for step what they did. So that's why I think it's like, I mean, if you want to use your example of punching somebody in the face, it's like allegedly, it's like me going around saying Blake punched me in the face and we don't know if it's true or not. If everybody records a video of you punching me in the face, then everybody knows that you punched me in the face. I can't take you to court, or it's a lot harder for me to prove in court that you hit me if it's off of an allegation and there's no evidence. If there's public video of it, then that's automatically far more egregious.
Miami is involved in this, though. There's not.
Yeah, they are. Everything is now tied together, and I think that the biggest piece with this, and for what you're saying, if Ole Miss gets held accountable. If I am a school that has publicly gone and grabbed a kid, so here's the sad thing. LSU might get tied into this because of the DeMond
they're
Williams
100%
situation.
already going to get tied into it.
Whether or not they were involved, which I know that you have brought up and LSU people have brought up, that the DeMond Williams circumstance was more of a situation where the kid jumped in and didn't really communicate that he was ready to jump in, and they didn't want to sell him out and put him into that situation. So
correct.
They're still regardless going to get tied into all this. Any public examples of tampering where kids had already signed contracts, they're all going to get knocked. Everybody's going to get knocked to some degree, or at least get accused.
Well, I mean, accusing is one thing, but again, not trying to defend Ole Miss here. I'm sure everybody thought I would come out here and just say, go after him, get him, go get him. But I just don't, I mean, in fairness, I just don't understand how you can only attack one of them. Because Miami, if we're just being blunt, my whole thought with Miami is they're the ones that set this precedent.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that started all of this. Oh, you think that we won't pay that $500,000 that you gave to Xavier Lucas to bring him here? Which, by the way, Miami came back when they were able to lock things down, and Xavier Lucas came back and had 2 PBUs. They don't care if it's going to make them win. None of these teams care if it's going to help them win. Joe, I think that, look, I don't know where you go from here. If we're going to speak about solutions, where is like the College Sports Commission approving all of these contracts? Where you have federal governance to do it. Where are you? You don't have to approve these contracts. You don't have to approve them. So
wait, but okay, this is where I keep getting lost when you bring this up, is because
they have federal guidelines so they can meet. Every conference agreed to go by the bylaws of the College Sports Commission.
Yeah, yes, but I don't know enough of and haven't read those bylaws, but from my understanding is that they're not supposed to rule on. They're not the judge and the jury in tampering cases. They're supposed to be on, is this an actual real contract that a player is being paid to do something that is NIL related? Can it be justified? That is how I'm reading into it.
That there's a court case and you can't say, well, we're not going to approve this until the court case is settled.
I'm sure that
people do that.
But hold on. This is what I'm saying though. I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. Well, I don't know what the CSC is. I don't know what the CSC is supposed to be doing. That's my whole point.
How about this?
I have zero idea what they're supposed to do.
Well, then come out with a statement then. Come out with a statement and let us know exactly your guidelines and your principles behind this, because everybody's sitting idle, commissioners, NCAA included, College Sports Commission, everybody sitting idle makes no changes in this because they don't want to get sued.
I just don't think that they were given that much power, and they were already slapped for trying to throw around power.
Well,
so I don't think that they're going to do anything.
They're nothing more than an accounting firm. They're nothing more than a paper company, because all you're doing is taking in paper. So then that whole guideline, that's a point that I'm trying to get to, really. Stop talking to me about the College Sports Commission. Stop talking to me about them, because if they can't do anything when they're supposed to be able to do something, then stop. The whole thing that they got popped on too was the collective, which got absolutely abused, by the way. Mm-hmm. It is what it is, man. Joe, I don't know where we go from here on this, but if you don't do anything to Pete Golding, by the way, to your point, if you don't do anything, God, this is the thing we probably should have talked about. If you don't do anything to Golding,
it makes the whole thing so much worse. And I think that it's a loud statement off of no actions of do whatever the hell you want. We don't care.
Yeah. God bless America. All right. Let's move on here. Speaking of players in the portal, LSU lands a commitment from the number one offensive lineman in the country from the portal, and Jordan Seaton going from Colorado to LSU. Oregon, Miami, and LSU were all after the services of Seaton, but Joe, Lane Kiffin and company were able to land. Your thoughts on not only Seaton going to LSU, but LSU getting 3 of the top 5 players in the transfer portal, 2 of those others not being just quarterbacks that went somewhere else. But Jordan Seaton, Principal Omam and obviously Sam Levitt, but you get the big left tackle here if you're LSU.
Yeah, we've already talked a bit about some of the transfer portal moves that LSU has made, and Lane Kiffin has done a tremendous job of putting together a really good, a tremendous first class here. We knew in the past with the class that he put together 2 years ago at Ole Miss that he's good at building rosters through the portal. The eventual next step is seeing what he can do through high school recruiting, and it's what we've talked about on why it makes more sense to go to LSU, because it's more sustainable to build through high school and then fill occasional holes. But this is exactly how you hit the ground running in year one. LSU fans, if you want to have some fun over at FanDuel, they're plus 1,500 to win a national championship if anybody wants to be that aggressive. Here's the thing specifically with Jordan Seaton. Your offensive line last year, it was incredibly underwhelming. A year removed from having one of the best in the country, you have a really, really weak group that could not get push against the run, or when you were running the football, you had a lot of issues with pass protection. A lot of guys were getting in very free on Garrett Nussmeier. Jordan Seaton, to slightly, I am not completely doing it, but to slightly dampen the general excitement for Seaton, you, as LSU fans, should not just immediately expect this kid to step right in and to dominate and to be an elite player. He has a lot of work that I think needs to happen here. You go and get a kid like this, and he ends up being the number 1 offensive lineman in the portal because he's a former 5-star. He's got a lot of tools. I'm sorry, but he was not coached well at Colorado. He was
Agreed.
not. From his film that I watched, his feet weren't great. His sets were out of position. He was getting beat to the outside because he was, again, completely out of position. I think that he needs to work on his upper body strength a little bit. But this is a school where you're going to, if he attacks the offseason, be able to make that leap. This is a program that is going to give him a much closer attention to detail in his development. I think that this is a kid who needs to stay for 2 more years in college, which would be even bigger for LSU, that he comes back, he has a solid first year, and then next season in 2027, he'd be an unreal player. This is the type of get where it's hard to find quality offensive linemen in the portal that sets you up for long-term success. But I'm bringing up his talent level to say patience is key with the development of a kid like this.
Well, and also when you watch his film, I think there's a couple of things that happen here. When he's locked in and focused, I do think he is one of, if not the best offensive lineman in the country. When locked in and focused.
Yep.
I think what happened with him is Colorado, with all due respect to Deion, Joe, quite frankly, they just, to your point, they were very poorly coached. And when I see him going up and run sets versus John Henry Daly, who went to Michigan, when I see him in pass pro when the game's, in hand, and he's not just like, man, what are we even doing around here? I see a guy that has the ability, has the athleticism to do what needs to be done. Joe, I think that he is, when locked in, I was the most impressed I was with him was how physical he was in the run game. Now, he needs to get that pad level down. He needs to lose. Yes. He needs to trim down a little bit more. And I think you're going into an offseason with a team and a strength staff and what LSU can provide that Colorado cannot, that can help you get there. I will bring this up again, too. This isn't the first time that Eric Wolford went after a left tackle like this. Proctor, they're LSU's offensive line coach. Proctor is another. He is another, too. I think we've seen the guys that Wolford has recruited, the big-bodied, very strong in the run game guys that have come from his camp. In reference to, you want to talk about Booker, you want to talk about a lot of these guys at the end of the Saban era that got drafted very highly. That is a part of that. There is definitely developmental stuff that needs to happen here, and I think will. That's not the I shouldn't do this, but I am going to do this. That part I actually don't worry about. That's not the part that I worry about. What I worry about is lock in every play, focus every play, because you're now going up against the best in the country every day, not just in the Big 12 where you have some guys. If this young man can come in, lock in, and focused, he has that ability. And, Joe, I think that schematically speaking, from what Lane wants to do, he's got to have a big offseason or he's going to get gassed because you're going to be up-tempo, on the ball. So he's going to have to. We were talking about this off air. Some of the players even reached out to me in reference to, hey, man, this first 2 weeks workouts is completely different than what we were going through in the last regime. So he's got to get in. He's got to get enrolled. There's a lot that needs to go on here. However, Joe, I do think he's the most talented from a physical standpoint in the portal, because if he puts it all together, he can get there. Again, there were times earlier against John Henry Daly and in the run game, I liked it. But when Colorado couldn't hold on, everybody was just like, man, this is getting, I don't want to say he quit, but at the same time, it's like I didn't see the level of effort because they were getting blown out and nobody had direction. In reference to LSU on the offensive line, you went to Maryland and got Ball, who was at Georgia and Maryland. You bring in Devin Harper. You have the number one interior offensive lineman in Solomon Thomas. Joe, my first question to Lane Kiffin is going to be, what do you do with Lamar Brown? Do you go both ways with him? Do you let him learn both? Can he get time on both lines of scrimmage? You bring back a five-star in Weston Davis. Can he take any developmental part of it? And you bring in Darren Stry. So I think that offensively along the offensive line, Joe, it's a massive upgrade. LSU was 16th in the SEC, dead last in the SEC in rushing. That's not going to happen here. But now putting your head and going to work, you went out and got three of the biggest and most critical pieces in the portal. You went out and got Sam Levitt, who was the number one portal quarterback. You went out and got the number one edge guy in Princewell Omam-Yellen. You went out and got the biggest left tackle that you could get, and you landed. Joe, those are the three biggest positions in sports. Someone to protect, quarterback, and the guy to rush the quarterback. And you landed on all three of them. So can you developmentally get there? And here's the thing. Joe, when it comes to spring, when it comes to fall, he's going up against Princewell. So now he doesn't have a choice. You're going up against Jordan Ross, who was a former 5-star. So if you don't have a big offseason, we're going to know really quickly. So I think even the level of competition in practice is going to have to push him for where he's going to need to be.
It seems likely that we're probably going to end up having to do the way too early top 5 tomorrow so that we can dedicate the appropriate time. So I want to deliver this take now, and probably we'll end up reiterating it when we do our way too early top 5s. I think that it's very plausible for a 9-3 season to happen in this first year, because I personally think that this is the most talented roster that has been at LSU in terms of balance over the past couple of years. I said that last year coming into the season, there were a lot of reasons to get excited, but I called out the one thing that ended up killing you, which was your offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the concern that was just never fully addressed and fixed.
From a Brian Kelly team, no less. Good Lord.
Right. The previous year when you had Jane Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr., that is an otherworldly offense. Right, and Will Campbell, you had an otherworldly offense, and it was an insane group of talent, but your defense was ass. Your defense was one of the worst in college football, so that was imbalanced. It was very, very lopsided. I think this season you have an opportunity for your offensive line to be more middle of the pack in the conference, maybe higher than that. Your defensive line has the opportunity to continue to be really dominant with a really, really like a really firm presence along the coaching staff on defense. Their secondary, the guys that they brought in, are really quality, and you're bringing back some key players. It comes down to me, the health of Sam Leavitt.
Mm-hmm.
How long can he stay on the field? Is he going to deal with any injuries? Can he protect himself better? But I do think that there is some mitigation here, that you brought in Hassan Longstreet to have him ready to go in any circumstance that Leavitt does go down with an injury. Longstreet is
sorry.
Well, I was going to say Longstreet's not a Van Buren type of a guy. This is not a guy that you're bringing in that's a good athlete, and maybe he can do some stuff. Maybe he can develop. This is a kid that was extremely highly sought after when he was a high school recruit. He turned down going to Texas A&M to go to USC, and now he's coming to LSU. So there is untapped potential, I think, across the board.
Well, and with Sam Leavitt's injury, he's going to be probably your QB1 during the entire spring. My question is, I think he's got more upside than Sam Leavitt, to be completely blunt with you.
Mm-hmm.
So what does his spring, if he goes off this spring, then what? Do you even have a battle there? I mean, because look, this isn't two really untalented quarterbacks that you're trying to battle out in. And so, like, even then, Joe, you bring up LSU, it's the level of depth for me. Like, defensively, Joe, they were 27th in the country in total defense. Offensively, they got absolutely nothing out of it. Now, I've been very vocal on this. I don't think you can replace Mansour DeLeone. But if you do, it's because you had the number one corner in the country that is going to be a sophomore in DJ Pickett. LSU did not have a player that developed more from year one to year two than their other boundary quarter in PJ Woodland. You bring in Haven Finney. Joe, is Fahim Delane your fourth safety? I think Ty Benefield was the number one safety in the portal. And he's going to play that star role that I think Perk was out of position with. So then you're bringing back multiple safeties that started. Your defensive line, you're finally going to probably be able to get home with 4, which played you all year. Does Jordan Ross, who's a former 5-star, put it together, and is your other guy on the other side that can get to the quarterback? No one, and I say no one. It would be very, how do I want to say this? I don't know if there's any other team in the country that has more experience at linebacker than LSU with Weeks and Daughtery. Name them. Joe, they have a combined 400 tackles together in the SEC. Oh, and by the way, your third guy was 5th in the SEC in tackles in Devon Keys. You talk about the interior defensive line. Joe, they're 2 and 3 deep. Or Richard Anderson, who was the number one defensive tackle in the country, and Lamar Brown. Defensively, you start asking the question, all right, Lane's going to give you more on offense. You return a lot of key pieces defensively, and you add on to it. Does that defense get better? Like everybody is focusing in on Lane, offense, receivers, Jace Brown, Sam Levitt. You bring in Dylan Jones. You bring in Seaton along the offensive line. You bring in Ball along the offensive line. Joe, Lane's going to be Lane on offense. I think when has he ever sucked? No, he's never. They're going to be good on offense. It's the defense for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think that. Okay, so rounding up just a little. You had a top 25 defense with an offense that literally could not move the ball. And you got a shitload of talent. So now that you're able to actually move the ball, Joe, LSU was the only team, they did it one time in the bowl game to score over 25 points against a P4 opponent. That's not going to happen to Lane. It is not going to happen to him. So you get to a part, yes, you're replacing A.J. Halsey. You're replacing Mansour DeLeone. That is almost impossible to replace. However, his brother is really freaking good and might be your fourth safety. I think the depth that they have defensively is where I look at this and go, Joe, I don't know. That's to me where I'm like, yo, dude, they might be able to put some things together.
I think a lot does need to be proven, though. I
agree.
I am in sitting in with LSU, the gigantic prove it mode, because it's still hard to be competitive in year one.
Well, let me interrupt you. Okay, because I've had that same thought. So now I want you to answer me this question just very quickly. They kind of proved it to you at corner when Mansour was out for a game, and you had two young corners that.
Yeah, wait, but Lane Kiffin wasn't the coach.
No, but Blake Baker and the entire staff is there. And we're talking about the defense. Hold on.
Okay.
Just hear me out. You couldn't get home with 4, and you bring in Principal Omam Yellen. You have a better linebacker presence with Weeks and Daughtery coming back. That is a lot of experience in the SEC.
But I'm just talking from the general premise of it is the first year of a new head coach. There
Fair.
are a lot of challenges that have to go through. It is very, very hard in your very first year to be immediately competitive. I am in a wait and see mode. I am not going to commit to them being better than 9-3 until I see how they play for the first 6 games of the season. I think that is how fair. I always try to approach it with new head coaches.
No, that's fair. What I meant was defensively.
No, they're improved. I think that there is a lot of reason to buy in. Replacing DeLeone is going to be a challenge, but there are a lot of reasons to buy in. So I don't disagree in that regard.
We'll see.
It's better than I think anyone could have expected them to have in year one of a new head coach.
Oh, heavens, yes. Well, yeah. I keep saying this every time. How much of an indictment is all of this shit on Brian Kelly?
Oh, it's huge. Brian Kelly's a moron. We've been over this.
All right, so we're skipping way too early top 20 or top 5.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be a 30-minute conversation. So I'd rather I know I told you pre-show like we probably won't go long on it, but we're already at an hour. So
yeah,
not
we'll
to
go
mention
long.
the fact
Let's
that we're
do
not
it tomorrow. I mean, we got the entire offseason to do that.
That's my point. We have so much stuff to cover. So let's save the long conversation.
Who said you shouldn't be here during the offseason?
Exactly.
You better be here during the offseason. All right.
Yeah.
Last one here before we get out of here. Arthur Smith is being announced, or has been reported, I should say, as the new offensive coordinator for Ohio State. Joe, this one is interesting to me. Very interesting, because the way that things ended in Pittsburgh and Atlanta, you're bringing in another NFL guy. But here's how I just see this in its entirety before I kick it off to you with going and getting Arthur Smith. This is better than Brian Hartline.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, I don't think Arthur Smith is a bad play caller at all. At all. But he goes back into the NFL ranks. You brought in Patricia. Now you're bringing in Arthur Smith. Your thoughts on this Arthur Smith move?
I love the move. And Dick Buck yesterday in the Discord tried to call me out. Dick Buck, I appreciate you. And I love all the guys in the Discord channel. Per Dick Buck, I remember you were indifferent. I'm finding the clip right now. Didn't hear from him after that. I went and found the clip, and I went and listened to myself talk about Matt Patricia from last year. And I have the same affinity for this move as I do the Matt Patricia one.
Yeah, no, it was
what I
was worried about Patricia.
Right, I went and listened to it, and I forgot that you said that you had pause because of the way that things ended in the NFL, and you were in wait and see mode. I was in a different circumstance. My whole bit was, this is a Super Bowl winning coach. This is one of the best DCs in the NFL. Had a couple of bad stops. He's ready to hit the ground running here in the NFL. Great defensive minds translate, and it did this year. I feel the same way about Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith, statistically, his offenses have been a little bit up and down. This past year, with a dinosaur at quarterback, they were 25th in yard, 15th in points. 2023, with Russell Wilson, who sucks, and Justin Fields, who sucks, they were 23rd in points, 16th in points. His last 2 good years as an OC, when he was with the Titans, 2nd in yards, 4th in points in 2020, 2019, 12th in yards, 10th in points. He has been a proven premier play caller, and I think a lot of his principles translate to working really, really well at Ohio State. He is a run-first coach. Ohio State, I feel, has been at its best when they have had really dynamic run games. Under Chip Kelly, which was a much more creative, spread you out type of a rushing approach compared to what Arthur Smith's probably going to do, you ran the ball really well and it opened everything up. I think we'll probably, and I don't know if it fully goes to this degree, if Ryan Day has a system that he wants him to kind of align with a lot of the principles they've run recently. There's going to be a lot of play action. There's going to be a lot of opportunities, I think, for Jeremiah Smith to get open more in one-on-one situations. I think that this overall is bringing in a guy who has NFL experience and has coached at a high level and being able to pull him away when he was interviewing for head coaching positions. He is somebody that many NFL franchises, this is not like Patricia, where Patricia needed a bit of a reclamation. You know, he needed to rebuild his brand. You're pulling a guy away that was in the hunt for offensive coordinator jobs. This is a really, really good pull for Ohio State, one that was so unexpected that I think it plays into why this was so good, because it was on nobody's radar.
I also do think it's a really good hire because it's a massive upgrade from a play calling position. Now, here's my questions. A guy with a very pro style offense, just what does it look like in college when it's not? You don't really do that as much. The other question that I have is not Arthur Smith. This is the 3rd straight different play caller that Julian Sain will have in his ear. How does that affect him? It's a 3rd different play caller that Jeremiah Smith will have. Now, to your question that you posed earlier, you said, does Ryan Day want to keep the same system? Does Arthur Smith come in here and have to learn what Ohio State does versus the inverse of him bringing in? And I would assume that is actually the case more than anything, is that Arthur Smith is going to have to get up to snuff about what Ohio State does. But, Joe, you're right. He is a really good play caller, and people know that. The situation in Atlanta wasn't all on him. The situation this year in Pittsburgh, which, by the way, was also not on him. Let me explain. Defensively, I know offensively they struggled, but you called Aaron Rodgers a dinosaur. But I also look at the situation when they had to win. It was defensively they couldn't get stops. Like against Baltimore at the end, they couldn't get stops. It took their offense to come in clutch time and to win them the game for them to get to the playoffs. That ultimately was the reason that they got there. So, look, I think that you have a guy with a lot of NFL principles. Ryan Day wants it more NFL-esque because of how things have gone, and I don't blame him for that. He's guys that have had NFL experience, which Chip Kelly also has as well. That's where they want to attack it. Now, defensively, this has worked in college the last 2 years, whether you look at Michigan, whether you look at Ohio State. There's nothing that I look at this and say that it won't work, because I think more than Hartline, like I look at Pittsburgh this last year, when it came to crunch time, he was thinking of players, not plays. And so that's the part when you think of Jeremiah Smith and others, you're going to have to give them the football. Offensive line in the run game is going to be more on, can you develop there more than anything, because Arthur Smith is going to want to run the football at a high clip.
And he's also, if I remember correctly, he's an offensive line guy by trade. He was a guard at North Carolina in college. So I think that there's a couple of, like, if we're just going to pinpoint here are the winners from this, it's the whole offense, but it is the offensive line, I think, is going to improve because you've got a guy who's got that type of a mentality of we're going to win through the trenches, we're going to be physical, we're going to run the ball. Bo Jackson for this upcoming year is a massive winner. I think that they're going to run the ball more deliberately. No more BS where you've got Julian saying trying to do a sneak on 3rd and 1, 4th in these tight situations. Give the damn ball to Bo Jackson. There's no reason why he can't be a 1,200-yard plus rusher with some really, really good stats this season. And then I think that knowing the body types of receivers that have been successful that he's worked with, knowing that he had A.J. Brown, who had two of his better seasons in an early part of his career before he ended up getting traded to Philly, a 1,000-yard season, big-bodied, physical guy in contested situations. DK Metcalf had a really good year this year, big-bodied guy in contested situations. Sets up Jeremiah Smith. Right. Jeremiah Smith's not going to punch any fans, so he's going to be on the field the whole time. I don't think that he will. I think he can compose himself a little bit better than DK. I think that knowing his skill set and his big, gigantic frame, he's going to win in a lot of those areas if that's how they're going to use him. And then lastly, having a pro-style guy to work with, a pro-style system to work with Julian Sayin helps Julian Sayin with his development. I think that there were times this year where you saw some limitations with the offense that they were running that didn't set up Julian to be able to navigate multiple reads. I think now you're going to put a little bit more on Sayin's shoulders, as well as making things easier through play action, that his development will translate to him as a draft prospect. He is, by the way, for anyone wondering, in the Heisman odds on FanDuel, Jeremiah Smith and Sayin are both at plus 1,300.
I do wonder how having 3 different play callers does affect him. Because, look, we've seen Hall of Fame quarterbacks in the NFL struggle with it. This isn't like, Joe, when was Brady's dry, quote unquote, dry Super Bowl run? When it was offensive coordinator turnover after offensive coordinator turnover. Mm-hmm. You saw the best of all time struggle with it in moments and times. Yeah. So I don't think that that's indictment on Sayin, but I think it's a really good hire to bring in Arthur Smith. He's a really good play caller. And here's the truth. It's a massive upgrade. Because I think Brian Hartline stinks plays.
Seriously, that's the biggest part with all of this is that Hartline did fine this year, but he's not an OC. He's a guy that needed to have just.
Did he really?
He did bad in their biggest games. That's what the problem was. He is a guy who was bound to be a head coach and was not meant to be a play caller.
Yeah. We'll see. I think it's a good move. All right, couple of super chats. Alex says, did y'all watch Alex Free climb that building? I didn't. Everybody was texting.
I saw clips of it. Yeah, I saw clips.
I didn't watch it at all. What did we do? Well, yesterday the South got hit pretty hard, and we don't deal well with ice and freezing cold weathers. So our power was out some of the day. So, no, I didn't see it. I just actually relaxed for once. Non-Saturday without football. This has got to be the first time we hadn't had a Saturday with football.
Yeah, and there was no NFL games. Yeah, no, I mean, I took full control of that. I watched a little film and then I watched a movie. It was weird. It felt very weird.
By the way, have you seen The Rip with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon on Netflix?
I've heard it's pretty good. I have not watched it. Yeah, I gotta watch it.
Yes, and I don't have time to watch movies. I saw the podcast with Rogan. So then I'm like, okay, well then I'll give it a shot. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to watch like 10, 20 minutes of this and then like fall asleep. And that's how I always do it, just or whatever. I stayed up until 12:30. I'm like, oh my God.
I heard though, because Damon said this on the Rogan interview. I heard him say this, and then Sean, my roommate, watched it with a buddy of his, and he said this was true off of what Damon's quote was, that it was designed to continually reiterate the plot lines because people are watching the movie on their phones. So I am curious to watch it from that regard to see what that's like.
First off, it's nonstop. Mm-hmm. It keeps you engaged the entire time.
That's cool.
And here's the thing. You know how most action films, it's just action, and there's no real plot to it? This is Inception level deception. I mean, it's a really good.
I gotta watch it. I gotta watch
it.
It.
Movie. Elks with a $2 super chat. And listen, with 2 kids under the ages of 6, I don't have the ability of watching movies, but this one kept me up. I promise you. Elks with a $2 super chat says he's an NFL OC in college, no recruiting.
And I don't even know if Patricia really recruits because I think that this is the best system that you're setting up where let your front office handle it. I think that's what we're trending towards, is that let your front office do everything and let a lot of the coordinators coach and your position coaches handle the rest.
Well, I don't think that he's just not going to recruit quarterbacks.
I'm doubt he'll be on the road, but he'll probably be on the phone with kids. You'll be like, hey, this is what we're going to do with you, X, Y, and Z.
I worry more about their wide receivers coach than I do Arthur Smith.
That's a good point.
It's a really good point. Oh, trust me, it's a really good point. All right, I got in an argument with a sitting head coach over it, and who won?
For real.
See y'all tomorrow. Way too early top 5. I might even change mine now that Joe's been yelling at me. See y'all then. Y'all stay safe. Peace.